morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Glad y'all are here on this. It's chilly fall day, finally,
Oh.
really chilly.
Colors are still great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful time of year. It's fantastic. So before we jump in and before I forget, I wanted to make one quick announcement. I don't have an announcement sheet again this week. I don't know what else is going on, but next week there is some kind of a new members gathering that needs to happen in this room. So we won't be meeting in here next week. We'll be meeting in, I think it's 206, the room at the end of the hall, if y'all know which one that is. So just to let you know, just head on down that way next Sunday. And we'll do things there. We're going to go through the book of Joseph. I mean, the story of Joseph today, which is a whole lot of material. So strap yourselves in and we'll see how this goes. Yes, Bender.
Rob, what version of the Bible are you using?
So I'm using what is called the New Revised Standard Updated Edition.
Okay.
So the Revised Standard, I think, was done maybe in the 40s and 50s. Then there was a new Revised Standard. And then in the 2000s, they issued this updated edition. So it's the NRSV UE. And after they have that done, I don't know what they're going to put after that to keep the initials going, but so that's the one. And I've chosen it in part because it has like the most current scholarship in the way that it's done the translation, right?
Well, it's easy to understand. I mean,
Good, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't have any prejudice towards it, though. I will say, I mean, I think there are other versions that are absolutely gorgeous and well worth reading, but that is the one that we're focusing on, is the NRSV UE. Okay, well, let's begin with a word of prayer. God, we thank you that you have given us the scriptures of the Hebrew people as part of our own scripture as Christian, and that we can listen for your truth speaking through the stories and the amazing ideas that we find there that help us understand you and ourselves and what it means to try to live as people created in your image and called to follow Jesus. And so we put this time into your strong and your loving hands and ask you to mold this time and mold us so that we can live in ways that honor you and that honor all of your creation as well. We rest in your grace. Amen. All right. So this is our last week on. Maybe it's not. Okay, maybe it's not properly, let's see. Here. So, all right, well, I'm gonna have to stand right here and forward it this way. Okay. What would not be happening like that? I apologize, y'all. I'm not sure why this isn't working.
Are there any experts in the room?
You need some tech support while you're start?
That'd be good.
I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna stop sharing and then try to share again and see if that'll fix it.
Hey, David, you did get me tickets, but then my friends had already booked something else.
So that is very weird.
I mean, I was like.
You never had that happen.
Well, I'll go get Gerald.
Oh, yeah. we'll be-
She knows this. I'll go get Gerald. Oh, yeah. If I know it from that.
Texted. It is. The whole week.
I'll go like
Yeah. and such and
She's probably gonna care.
And they put on big.
It's definitely on.
I'm just.
And freezing.
Personality.
Next thing is to close down.
Something loud. Okay, yeah, I can see that. The kids.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm gonna close down the whole PowerPoint and then I'm gonna go back in and see if it.
Reboot.
All right.
Let's see. Imagine on, you have kids' activities with coffees and activities. I could see this feeling, but it's not imagining that happens. Oh, why the big library system. You can make a copy. Yeah, and then you should tell them so much. I like it when you give me. This, or want to take it towards sometime. It's nice. We're hard at that. Serious.
You
just got it.
I think I've got it. Let's see.
Try one more.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
She
Has
said,
restarted.
everything go back in and it's working now. Okay, so we're good. Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate it. Okay, so. Just as a quick review, I just wanted to run through like this family that we've been talking about so far. So, we had all the way up through Noah and his family with, that was dealing with the entire like creation, all the world, everyone. And then we zoomed in on one family, right? In chapter 12 of Genesis. And that was the family of Abraham and Sarah that God made a covenant with. And that covenant was continued through their son Isaac. And Isaac had twins, Esau and Jacob. And we had that moving story last week about them being separated and reconciling because of Esau's graciousness. So this week we're going to pick up with Jacob, and he ended up having children by 4 different women. So he had Rachel that he was really in love with, but he had to marry Leah first, and then he had children with both of their slave girls. So he's got 12 sons and 1 daughter, which we'll see in just a second, thanks to Rich Schneidinger, and it's something he created. So this is what we're going to focus on really, is Joseph and his 11 brothers. So this is the family that we're looking at specifically. And so this is where the covenant made with Abraham is continuing through this line. And that's very important to kind of keep in mind as we're looking at this. So some of the topics we're going to look at: the complexity of individuals. The Bible is actually really good at not portraying cardboard cutout humans, right? These are people that they're good, but they're also not good. They're likable, but they're also not likable. Like they're like us, in other words, right? So it's really, I think it's a tremendous testament to the integrity of the Bible that it's willing to let all of the negative stuff show and not just the positive. You don't get superheroes in the Bible. It's just not part of the way of thinking. Our culture loves superheroes. You just don't get them. You get the complexity of family systems, which we've seen before, and we're going to continue to see. So it's interesting when people talk about family values in our culture and they say, oh, the Bible has family values. I don't know what that means. The significance of wisdom and of faith in God. Dreams, human intentions, and the providence of God. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind in this culture, dreams are often seen as something that's given by God, right? And human beings are trying to understand, well, what's that mean? And sometimes they'll even tell the dream and they don't really understand, even though they think they understand what they means, they don't understand what it means. And it only becomes clear much later. We saw this last week very powerfully when Esau forgave his brother. We're going to see the power of forgiveness and reconciliation again this week between brothers. All right, Rich, this is Rich's, you'll see my gave him credit down here. This is Rich's creation, it's beautifully done. So we start up with Jacob. He marries Leah. He has a bunch of kids with Leah. Remember, she's the unloved one who God blesses with lots of kids, including one daughter named Dinah. There's a whole story about Dinah, but we're not going to focus on it in the interest of trying to get through a bunch of material. Then Leah's slave gives birth to two more of Jacob's children. Then Rachel has these two, and Bilhah, Rachel's slave, has these two. So you got all these kids that are being born to Jacob. So he's he got lots of kids. That means lots of complexity in the family for sure. You're going to see, you probably had great things that you said about this slide. I'm not going to focus on it quite as much as you, Rich, probably, but you'll see how people that we're going to hear about later are going to show up through these lines. Moses and Aaron, King David, King Saul. Eventually, Jesus is going to come from the line of Judah many generations later. So this is Jacob's huge family.
Can you send us that slide? Or
Yeah.
can you post it somewhere we can access it?
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so let's read our text for Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, but the slave wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Israel, that is Jacob, that's the same person. Remember, he has those two names. Loved Joseph more than any of his children. Okay, bingo, right there, we got some problems, right? You're playing favorites. Loved more than any of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him an ornamented robe, the coat of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably to him. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream, and he told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But his father rebuked him and said, "What kind of dream is this that you've had? Shall we indeed, I and your mother and your brothers, and come and bow down to the ground before you?" Okay, so he's stirring the pot here. But, he's just telling them what he dreamed, right? Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So Joseph went after his brothers and found them. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, Reuben was the oldest of all the brothers, kind of the one most responsible. When Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him," thinking that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornamented robe that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then Judah said to his brothers, so Judah is the next oldest, okay? Judah said to his brothers, and he's the one who's eventually going to have, like in his lineage, Jesus is going to be born, right? Judah said to his brothers, "Oh, what profit is it if we kill our brother? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites. And when they took Joseph to Egypt. Then his brothers took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They had the ornamented robe taken to their father, and they said, "This we have found. Now see whether it is your son's robe or not." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." So I mean, if you just stop and think about it, it's a really poignant moment because it's the son that he just treasures. You know, one of the two sons, the oldest son from the wife Rachel, that he loves the most. So if you kind of picture that, he's like brokenhearted. Okay, so what are some observations? The theme of family dysfunction and conflict between parents, sons, and brothers continues. So we have this thing going all the way back to brothers, right? Cain and Abel, and then Isaac and Ishmael, there was all that tension. Esau and Jacob, and now Joseph and his brothers. In this ancient Near Eastern context, as I said, dreams were usually thought to be sent to people from God. But Joseph's family interprets his dreams as a sign of his arrogance, rather than a divine word that's going to happen. That guy's just really full of himself. That's kind of how they hear it. Joseph becomes a target of his brothers, one, because first of all, he starts out by tattletaling on them to his father, right? Second, his brothers recognize and resent the blatant favoritism of their father, and then his dreams and the way he tells them make it look like he annoyingly feels superior to everybody else in the family, which, like, that's a recipe for being disliked. It's interesting, God isn't mentioned once in this chapter, yet God's purposes seem to be getting worked out in the background of what's happening, which we'll see as the thing goes on. There's clearly a tension among the brothers about what to do with Joseph. Some of them, we're not told which actually, want to murder him outright. Reuben suggests putting him into a pit. He wants to prevent the murders, to give him back to his father. But Judah wins the day by suggesting, hey, let's accomplish three things at once. Get rid of him without murdering him. Make some money by selling him to slave traders. Hey, that helps us. And make our father think that his beloved son has been killed by an animal, so that we don't bear any repercussions. So their intention in getting rid of Joseph has been to prevent his dreams from becoming a reality. But of course, ironically, by selling him into slavery in Egypt, they're going to enable that very thing to happen. The reader can only wonder about the ensuing dynamics among the 11 brothers. This was one I just kept thinking about. Like, imagine them going home, and for years they're living together and they all know what they did. Just wonder how it would affect them, you know? Okay, now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph. Now we get the Lord back in here, okay? The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. He made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. As the story goes on, Joseph seems like one of those people, like whatever he touches, like it just turns to gold. He's really competent. He's good at what he does. He impresses people. He's a remarkable person, annoying though he may be as a 17-year-old, you know. Joseph was handsome on top of everything else. He's handsome and good looking. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes upon him and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he's put everything that he has in my hand. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not consent to lie beside her or to be with her. One day, however, when he went into the house to do his work, and while no one else was in the house, she caught hold of his garment and saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. She called out to members of her household and said, see, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came in to lie with me and cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. The wicked ways of women. Then she kept his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him the same story. When his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, saying, this is the way your servant treated me, he became enraged. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison. But the Lord was with Joseph there in prison and showed him steadfast love, gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Okay, so once Joseph is in Egypt, the Lord reappears as a character. Remember, we've talked about that before, that the Lord, Yahweh, is a character in these stories, as a character in the narrative, and also this really defining presence in Joseph's life and in how Joseph sees the world, which is actually it's going to play out in important ways. We've talked before about how God chooses this particular people in part because God wants God's vision of what is good and right and true to be carried forward by a family for the blessing of the world, right? And so part of what's going to happen here is that we're going to see that Joseph really seems to get in touch with that covenant vision, like that vision God has, that God wants to be expressed in the life of this family. So this is like an important thing, that the Lord reappears in the narrative and is with Joseph and shows him steadfast love. Even though he's a slave, Joseph is recognized as blessed by God, capable manager, so he's elevated. His righteousness doesn't shield him from false accusations of Potiphar's wife, who subtly manipulates her husband by insinuating it is his fault for having brought a Hebrew into the household. Right? So she's playing on ethnic prejudice. I think this is important in this way too. Part of what Scripture shows us, and part of what I think experience shows us, is that being righteous and doing the right thing doesn't shield you from bad things happening. Anybody that tells you, oh, if you become a Christian, your life gets so good, and that's just not biblical. It's not true, right? God can be with people, and those people can still suffer terribly. They can go through hard times, right? So there's not this equivalency of turning to the Lord and the Lord will take care of you. It's more complex than that. So the Lord is taking care of him. That's true. But he's also suffered, right? And both of those at once are the truth about human experience and the truth that's portrayed in Scripture. So, driven by both his own guilt, that maybe it was his fault for bringing a Hebrew into the household, and by anger, Potiphar puts him in prison. And once again, the Lord shows steadfast love to Joseph, and he becomes a leader even in the prison. I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff now. While in prison, Joseph develops a reputation for interpreting dreams, and he always gives credit to God when he does this. I'm not going to go into all the dreams he interprets. It's long passages. After 2 years in prison, Joseph is called to interpret one of the Pharaoh's dreams, because he's gotten this reputation now, right? Okay. Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. He's the most powerful person, bar none. He rules however he wants to rule. Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was hurriedly brought out of the dungeon. When he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it. He's already asked, magicians and others to come in, and none of them could do it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph said to Pharaoh, it is not I. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the banks of the Nile, and 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. Then 7 other cows came up after them, poor, very ugly and thin. Never had I seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The thin and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows, but when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had done so, for they were still as ugly as before. Then I awoke. I fell asleep a second time, and I saw in my dream 7 ears of grain, full and good, growing in one stalk, and 7 ears withered, thin and blighted by the east wind, sprouting after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. But when I told it to the magicians, there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what God is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, as are the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what God is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. After them, there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land. Now, therefore, so he goes even further. He's going to make a suggestion. Okay. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a man, hint, hint, who is discerning and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plenteous years. Let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming and lay up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall serve as a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to befall the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. So Pharaoh said, since God has shown you all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves at your command. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as his wife. Thus, Joseph gained authority over the land of Egypt. So, like you can see, he's had this crazy life, like highs and lows. From the beginning of his interaction with Pharaoh, Joseph deflects credit from himself, emphasizing God. God is the interpreter of the dreams. In offering the dream interpretation, Joseph emphasizes God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. Okay, this is a theme that we keep like circling back to. This indicates that God is active not only in Joseph's life, but in Pharaoh's life. So I know I say this over and over again, but I just encounter so many Christians who feel like we have the truth. God cares about us. God shows us things. God speaks to us. All those other people are benighted. That's not a biblical perspective. God is at work in Pharaoh's life. And so we need to be humble. We need not just play like we're the only people that God cares about. I think that's a really important part of the biblical vision. Okay. Joseph not only interprets Pharaoh's dreams, without waiting for any response from Pharaoh, he proactively proposes a plan for how Pharaoh could deal with what appears at first as this unavoidable disaster. Now, it's interesting because Pharaoh is given agency, ultimately by God, to act for his people's well-being. God's concern extends beyond just the covenant community. God cares about the people of Egypt. That's part of why the Pharaoh has the dream in the first place. Right? So let's always remember that God's love, God's concern extends beyond us. And anytime we want to circle the wagons and say, oh, we're special because we're God's chosen. No, we're chosen in order to be a blessing to the world. We're not chosen because we're so special, but because God loves us specially. Okay, the narrator portrays Pharaoh paying close attention to what Joseph suggests, including Joseph's words about God's presence. Pharaoh, in fact, makes a theological statement. Since God has shown you all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. Right? Pharaoh confirms Joseph's place in society by giving him this long Egyptian name, meaning God speaks and lives. Isn't that interesting that that's the name he would give him? And giving him an Egyptian wife, Asenath, who's from a noble family. You can see how that would really bring him into like the upper echelons of the society from being in a dungeon. The reader has witnessed Joseph's roller coaster life. Favorite son, hated brother. Sold into slavery, made a manager in Potiphar's house. Unjustly imprisoned, made a leader in prison. But forgotten, 2 years, he just languishes in the prison. Finally, made second only to Pharaoh. So it's like boom, 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 boom. Like you did this great diagram. In in Rich's PowerPoint, he has this great diagram showing all these ups and downs, right? And it really was. That's really what Joseph has experienced. Now, again, I'm just reiterating something I said before. Throughout all of this, part of what the text wants us to remember is that God is present. God isn't necessarily directly manipulating the events, but God is accompanying Joseph through the highs and the lows. And one of the beautiful things about Joseph is that when he gets on the highs, unlike a lot of people, he doesn't forget about God. He keeps remembering God. And that's going to be a theme that we're going to see with the Jewish people going further into the text, is that God's going to warn them. God's going to say, when things are going great, don't forget about me. Because if you forget about me, you're going to run into trouble, that like is going to be brutal. And Joseph, he keeps, whether he's in the low place or the high place, he keeps focusing on God. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh. So he'd been 13, remember he was 17 in that first section. So it's approximately probably 12 or 13 years that he's been now in slavery. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. During the 7 plenteous years, the earth produced abundantly. Joseph stored up grain in such abundance that it was beyond measure. The 7 years of plenty that prevailed in the land of Egypt came to an end. And the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says to do, do. And since the famines had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine had become severe throughout the world. So that's going to set us up for the whole next section of the story. Let me just check the time.
Rob, what happened to the cows?
What happened to the cows?
Because
So-
of the famine.
The cows were symbolic of the years.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, they were just symbolic. That's all they were.
Okay, thanks.
So at this point, like the 7 fat cows are starting to be eaten by the thin cows, symbolically. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, so Jacob, we're going back up to Jacob in Canaan, remember, with all the sons, right? When Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live, excuse me, and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he feared that harm might come to him. So Benjamin is the younger son of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Rachel, the one that Jacob loved the most. And she had two sons, Joseph and Benjamin, right? So Joseph is in Egypt. Jacob doesn't want to send his young son Benjamin because he's afraid he's going to lose him too, because he's already lost the one son of Rachel. Now Joseph was governor over the land of Egypt. It was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers, those 10 who sold him into slavery all those years ago, came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Dream number one, boom. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he treated them like strangers and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. He said to them, you're spies. You come to seek the nakedness of our land. They said, we are 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more. He says, that's what you think. But Joseph said to them, it is just as I have said to you, you are spies. Here is how you shall be tested. As Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. And he put them all into prison for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, tell you what, let one of your brothers stay here while you are imprisoned. The rest of you shall go and carry grain for the famine to your households, and then bring your youngest brother, right? So leave one brother, the rest of you go with grain back to your dad, and then come back with Benjamin, with that youngest brother. They're not in much of a position to argue. They said to one another, alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother, to Joseph. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. This is why this anguish has come upon us. Then Reuben, remember Reuben all that time ago, he wanted to spare his life. Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. Then he returned and spoke to them. And he picked out Simeon and had him bound before their eyes. I just want to pause, he's sitting there, they're speaking, let's say they're speaking Hebrew. He can understand every word, but when he speaks to them, he speaks in Egyptian and then has somebody translate it into Hebrew, right? I mean, just try to imagine what he would be feeling. Right? Sometimes we have to really use our imagination, because it's on the page, but if you really think about, there are these 10 brothers, they did him so wrong. And he's hearing them talk about the wrong they did to him, It's like, I can't imagine everything that would be stirring up in him. So Pharaoh's decision to follow Joseph's proposed plan of saving grain during years of plenty leaves not only sustenance for the Egyptians, but for people throughout the world. Jacob sends 10 of his sons to buy grain, as we talked about, holding back Rachel, the only full brother of Joseph. Joseph's dream is fulfilled. I love that scene. Whoa. Joseph recognizes them, but treats them like strangers. Why do you think he treats them like strangers? Any ideas?
He hadn't decided how he's gonna deal with them, really.
Yeah, he wants to know what's in their hearts.
Yeah.
Right? What's really in their hearts. I think that's part of it.
And he needs to get Benjamin.
And he needs to get Benjamin. Yeah, he wants to see Benjamin. At least a couple reasons, right? Yeah. He sets in motion a series of events that have as their hoped for goal reunification of his family, from which he was so brutally sent away all those years earlier. So, to that end, he accuses them falsely, and he knows it's false, but he accuses them of being spies. Harsh treatment puts them at his mercy. It forces them to reveal more about themselves and their family, including their father and Benjamin. Like he wants, in addition to everything else, he wants more information from them, right? And by like not just embracing them, like he forces it out of them as he's testing them. Swearing by the life of Pharaoh, which is interesting because it makes him really look Egyptian. Because normally he'd only swear by God, right? But he really wants them to think he's a serious Egyptian, right? So swearing by the life of Pharaoh, Joseph sets a test. All must remain in Egypt except one who will fetch Benjamin. Joseph says he's doing this in order to discover whether there is truth in them. As they had put him in a pit years earlier, he puts them in the pit of a prison. Part of what, as I was reading, is they were saying there's parallels between what they did to him and what he's going to do to them in interesting ways. After 3 days, he releases them, telling them he fears God. Now all except one may return to their father to fetch Benjamin. In this deeply poignant scene, he listens as they confess that they're paying the penalty, right? We talked about that already. Did we not do wrong to the boy? He wouldn't listen. He's overcome. He weeps. And I think all this gives us a glimmer into his own heart, that there's a tenderness there. He hasn't become all bitter and angry at them. There's still a tenderness there somewhere in him. So, story continues. I'm going to summarize it. Before they leave Egypt, Joseph has his servants fill their bags with the grain that they bought, which you'd expect, but also place the money they paid for the grain back into the sacks. Okay. When they discover the money during their journey, the text says that they lose heart, afraid they'll be accused of cheating Pharaoh. They return to their father Jacob in Canaan, and he is very afraid to let them take his youngest son Benjamin back to redeem his other son Simeon. The famine, though, gets so bad that Jacob's son Judah says that they must take Benjamin with them to Egypt, and that he will take full responsibility for Benjamin's safety. You remember, Judah's the one who decided, let's sell Joseph into slavery, right? It's the same one. He says, if anything happens to Benjamin, he, Judah, vows to bear the blame forever. Jacob finally relents. Taking both the money they found in their sacks and additional gifts, they return with Benjamin to Egypt. Like they're going to take the money that had been sent back with him and they're going to return it. They're going to say, we didn't intend to take this money back here, because they're going to show that they're trying to be honest. Like that's the point of all that. Okay. And they eventually are led into Joseph's presence, now with their brother Benjamin. Joseph inquired about their welfare and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? They said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads and did obeisance. Then he looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. With that, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with affection for his brother, and he was about to weep. So he went into a private room and he wept there. So Joseph throws this big dinner for all of them. So no, he's not saying they're spies anymore. They're our guests, okay? So he doesn't suspect them of being spies and he's making peace with them. However, when he sends them all on their way back to Canaan, he plans a test to test them one more time. He sneakily has his servants hide his personal silver cup in Benjamin's baggage, okay? After the brothers have traveled a short way out of Egypt, Joseph sends servants to intercept them, accusing them of having stolen his silver cup. Well, none of them know it's in there, not a single one, not even Benjamin, right? They deny this charge, pledging to all become slaves of Joseph if the cup is found in any of their belongings. The servants search, find the cup in Benjamin's sack. So all the brothers are forced to go back to Egypt. Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house while he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that one such as I can practice divination? He's saying, I could practice divination and see that you had this, right? I could see, even though that wasn't true, because he planted it, but anyway. And Judah said, what can we say, my lord? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. So they all think Benjamin did it, the rest of them. Here we are then, my lord's slaves, both we and also the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But Joseph said, far be it from me that I should do so, that is, make all of you my slaves. Only the one in whose possession the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for the rest of you, go on up to peace to your father in peace. What do you think they're going to think of that?
Terrified they can't lose benches.
Right?
All people.
Then Judah stepped up and said to him, remember Judah again, oh, my lord, let your servant, that is, let me, please speak a word in my lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. When our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother goes with us will we go down, for we cannot see the man's face, that is, Joseph's face, unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife Rachel bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray hairs in sorrow to Sheol. Sheol is the land of the dead in this Hebraic way of thinking. They didn't have heaven and hell like we think of. They just had this place that the dead went called Sheol. In other words, I'm going to die of grief. Now, therefore, when I come, this is still Judah speaking to Joseph. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. I, your servant, became surety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame in the sight of my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my lord in place of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father. So, driven by these circumstances beyond their control, the brothers convinced Jacob to let them to do what the supposed Egyptian official Joseph demanded, go to Egypt with Benjamin. So they are received more graciously by Joseph this time. And the narrator indicates that what's going on in his heart by telling us that he weeps. So we keep getting these little pictures into the heart of Joseph as this tender guy. But Joseph isn't done, right? He has his personal silver cup, and its theft will be worse than the money that they'd previously been given, because this cup belonged to Joseph himself. So it's like a personal affront, personal thing. When confronted by their Egyptian pursuers, the brothers, they're confident they're innocent, saying they're honest men. Therefore, they rashly promise that if the cup is found in any of the possessions, the brother who has it will be put to death, they say, and the rest will become slaves. The Egyptian steward, it's interesting, shows greater mercy towards them than they were willing to show, right? He said, no, nobody's going to get killed for this. Just going to take you back. That one's got to be a slave. When the cup is found among Benjamin's belongings, they tear their clothes in distress, and they all go back with Benjamin. Where once, years ago, Joseph was completely without power in his brother's hands, now he holds all the power, and their lives are in his hands. Representing all the brothers, Judah acknowledges their guilt, turns all of them over as slaves to Joseph, a reversal of when they had all turned him over to be a slave. Right? You see, so the narrator is creating these reversals, right? It's the same sequence of things that tend to happen. Like his steward before him, Joseph, the supposed Egyptian, is more gracious to them than they would be to themselves, saying that only the one who stole the cup has to stay as a slave. So it's a test. How are they going to respond? the tension, I mean, it's incredible. In self-interest, to gain their own freedom, is that how they're gonna respond? Or in a way that shows the depth of the family bond that they ignored many years earlier when they sold Joseph, right? I think this is an incredible, like the tension in this story just builds and builds and builds. Judah responds with a remarkable speech, reviewing what has transpired on their first journey to Egypt, their arrival back to their father's response. Through Judah's speech, Joseph gets to hear for the first time how Jacob reacted to his own disappearance and supposed death all those years ago. And he gets to hear that his father still mourns for him. Judah places an emphasis on how their own father will suffer if Benjamin isn't allowed to return home and has to stay in his place as a slave. So Joseph can see that his brothers are placing the entire family's well-being above their own desires and needs. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So everybody else left except him and his brothers. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive?" How do you think they felt in that moment? Like his brothers couldn't answer.
I got goosebumps right now. Okay.
So dismayed. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing or harvest. God sent me before you to preserve you, for you, a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God."
Wow.
"Hurry, go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with them. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh comes off looking pretty good in this story. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and go back to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me, so that I may give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you may enjoy the fat of the land. You are further charged to say this, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Give no thought to your possessions, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, I mean, just imagine this moment for a minute, right? They told him, 20 years later, Joseph is still alive. He is even ruler over all the land of Egypt. He was stunned. Now, that's not an understatement. He could not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph that he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Israel, that is Jacob, said, "Enough, my son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die." So Joseph is overcome with emotion, and not unlike Esau did to Jacob a generation earlier, extends forgiveness to his brothers and brings about this family reconciliation. Though, as we will see, they still have doubts about whether he really forgives them. This is an interesting little part of the story. And they think maybe he just wants his dad to see his dad again. So he's acting like he forgives them so that they'll bring his dad. We'll see what happens with that. Though his brothers had intended evil when they sold Joseph into slavery, God continued working God's purposes in Joseph's life for the good of his family, the Egyptians, and the world. Pharaoh is happy for Joseph. Those outside the covenant community celebrate the good experienced within the covenant community. Now, I think we should flip that around too. Shouldn't people in the covenant community celebrate the good for people outside the covenant community? These little details, we could just pass over them, but I think they convict us. When we don't show the same kind of grace towards others that others show towards people in the covenant community, you know? God expects more of us than to think we're so great because we're the Christians or the Catholics or the Protestants or whatever, right? You know, God expects more of us. For the second time, this was interesting, for the second time in his life, Jacob gets to experience the fruit of grace and forgiveness within his dysfunctional family. Yeah. Incredible that he got to experience it twice. Jacob and all his family moved down to Egypt and lived there under Pharaoh's protection. As he nears death after 17 years in Egypt, Jacob blesses all of his sons and instructs them to make his grave back in the land of Canaan, where his ancestors lived. Realizing that their father was dead, so now he's died, Joseph's brother said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong we did him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave us this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him and said, "We are here as your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do me harm, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." All right. How are we doing on time? Right on time, man. Question?
So I've read commentaries on Joseph's life before, and what do you think of it being like a foreshadow to Jesus? Insofar as like, Joseph, is Jacob's favorite son, his beloved son. And then he is rejected by his brothers, and he suffers. And then he gets raised up to a kind of place of authority and forgiveness, and
Yeah.
he redeems,
Yeah.
Jacob and his family, the 12 tribes, by bringing them to Egypt and. Yeah.
So
that.
I think your question is really, really an interesting and an important question. And so I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first way is that part of what I think is very important is that when we read the Hebrew Bible, we need to read it as if it is a Jewish text written by Jews that Jews have used for millennia as their guiding text. And insofar as it is that, and it has its own integrity as that, there's nothing in the Hebrew Bible, in and of itself, as it was written by the people that wrote it, that points towards anything in the New Testament. Okay, now that's one answer. A second answer is that Christians, as they looked at the Hebrew Bible, they saw these resonances, they saw these things that were like patterns that they recognized in the text. And they saw those, and those helped to inform their faith, right? So that when the person or people writing this story of Joseph were writing the story of Joseph, they were in no way kind of foreshadowing or predicting anything about Jesus. They were just writing about Joseph. But Christians, going back to those texts, they saw something that they could incorporate into their own faith that was meaningful and that like illuminated things. And you see the same thing happening when there are words that are spoken by some of the prophets that then are brought into either the New Testament or in Christian theology, where people are saying, this points to Jesus, right? And I'm gonna put all my cards on the table. Like, I tend not to be a person who says that points to Jesus. I tend to be someone who says, when I read that, I think of things about Jesus, but I don't think it was written to point to Jesus. It was written in its own context for its own purposes. It wasn't written for us Christians. It was written for Jews. But we Christians we accept it as part of our scripture. So we can go back there and say, oh, this makes me think about such and such. And it illumines my faith in certain ways as a Christian. Do those two things, I mean, tell me if that's not a clear explanation, because I think it's a pivotal.
In a way, it's like, for this class too, for us to be able to see it as Jews have interpreted this, how Jesus interpreted it, it tells us, or we'll see it through another way.
Yes,
So the Jewish interpretation might be centered around divine lineage, providence, covenant. Whereas the Jesus interpretation will tell us to focus on reconciliation, all things can be restored, there's a future ahead that we can and so on.
so part of what I'm trying to do in this gathering is to focus as if we were Jews reading, right? And to keep it with a Jewish lens, because it is a Jewish text. Yes,
But the New Testament is written by Jews as well.
right. And it's written by Jews who have come to believe in Jesus as the Messiah.
But they're still Jews.
They are still Jews,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree. And they understand prophecy in particular ways as well. Like Matthew refers back to particular passages in the Hebrew Bible as predicting things about Jesus. And Jesus is the fulfillment of those things. And that's totally Christian perspective. And that, as a Christian perspective, that's completely legitimate. But as people looking at the Hebrew Bible as the Hebrew Bible, and not as the Old Testament and the New Testament, but as the Hebrew Bible that is a Jewish text, that movement would not be made by Jews. Like, they wouldn't see those connections. So what I'm saying is, like, from a Christian perspective, yes, you can say that that predicts it, or that that's a foreshadowing. But from a Jewish perspective, no, it's not. It's the story that it is.
I think there's another parallel here because the woman set him up by using his coat to pretend that he had been the aggressor. And then he planted the silver cup to lure his family back. So in both instances of bad behavior, devious, brought something good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the complexity. Remember at the beginning, I talked about all the complexity. And I mean, and part of what this text wants to affirm is that God was at work through it all.
So
Not making it happen, but when people did things, God could work through it.
And it's a credit to Joseph that he took advantage of the position that he had and used it for the good of God, for good.
Right?
Yeah.
It trained him to live the role that he had to.
But I want to come back to your point, because I think your question is one of the pivotal questions about the texts that makes us ask, what does it mean to look at the Hebrew Bible as something that was like, that has its own integrity, its own meaning, apart from Jesus and apart from the New Testament. And I say that in part because for Jews, that really is the case. It has its own integrity, its own meaning in their relationship with God without them having anything to do with the New Testament, right? And it's really, as Christians, we are, I think, inculcated in this idea of using the Old Testament in ways that fit things within our New Testament vision. But Jews don't. And so part of what I think is important is that, like, we live as brothers and sisters in this world with Jews. And they don't look at the Hebrew Bible as pointing towards anything that is New Testament. They look at it as their articulation of their relationship with God. And that has its own integrity. And that's what I'm trying to I'm trying to make that distinction. I'm not trying to poo-poo a Christian understanding. But I'm also saying this has its own integrity. And we need to not, I don't know what the word is, but there's this idea of triumphalism, but the Jews don't really understand their own scriptures, because if they did, they'd all believe in Jesus. Like that's a certain attitude that some people have.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wrong attitude in terms of giving respect and honor to the text itself and to what God was doing in the text with the Jewish people and continues to do in relation to the Jewish people. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So it's a both and, it's not an either or, right? Okay, I know it's time, so thank you all so much. We'll continue with the Exodus from slavery next week.